if I have anything to suggest to you, listen to Steve today. Your head will hurt when he's through with you. Go get a drink, finish your day, and come back and listen to it again. Well, when I get it posted, which will be Monday, listen to it again because truthfully, this is one of those like first year of law school. At the end of law school, your brain was just fried. That's because you got so much. That's what this is. But be patient with yourself. It's going to be a very practical. Steve works with attorneys. So we're strange people, and he knows that. And he knows we have certain parameters that we have to comply with. So trust him on that. Okay, some housekeeping stuff. You'll get your CLE program at the end. I hope you remember this is a 2-hour program, folks. Now, if you can only stay an hour and you want a special CLE cert for that, then just email me at admin@acbcforum.org and I'll send you a shorter. Logging on, we keep track of attendance. So the CLE cert will be posted at the tail end. I will be posting the materials that Steve has prepared, which are copies of the slides he's going to be going through. I'll be posting those periodically. They will be the same document. If you see it posted like 15 minutes apart, that's because only the people that are there at the time the posting goes live get to see the posting. So, and the materials will also be available at the website. Sidebar note on this, normally I never have two big programs back to back, but it has happened. So we have Steve's program today for 2 hours. Then we have tomorrow a pop-up on Ninth Circuit case law update. Judge Collins will be one of the three presenters there. That also is I think it's an hour and a half program. So anyway, Steve, I'm going to shut up and let you go ahead. Tell these folks what it is you want to talk about.
Thanks, Diane. I appreciate the intro. Let me pop up my slides here and make sure sound is on, get to the right deck here. And so I'll introduce myself in a second. I like to start with a couple of opening slides. Let me just move some things off my screen. We've got a good group of people attending today, and I am absolutely open to having questions during the presentation, making it interactive. I have the chat window open on the side. So if you have a question, please throw it in there. I'll try and get to it if I see it. If for some reason I don't see it and you really want to ask a question, feel free to, raise your hand, interrupt. I'm happy to be flexible that way. I'm going to bounce around a lot between slides and live examples. So I'm not going to put this in presentation mode. So you'll sort of see the slides on the side. And as Diane said, you'll get copies of all these slides as we go through. So I want to start with this and just say, I don't know how many of you use AI on a regular basis, but the question really is, and I think Diane was alluding to this, is, when's the last time you spent 3 hours on something that AI can do in 3 minutes, right? What these tools are able to do now is nothing short of astounding. And I hope by the end of this presentation, you'll have a really good sense of what these tools can do, where it's going, how you can use them in your practice, and some things to think about. And, as Diane mentioned, I work with a lot of attorneys, as you'll see in a second. So Scott here is one of my closest friends. He runs a family law firm here in Los Angeles. That's where I live. And Scott uses a variety of the tools. He uses ChatGPT, he uses Claude. And this is one of my favorite quotes. And as you see today, I rarely read the things on the slide. I talk to a few key points, and they're really for you to get more information. But this is one I actually will read because I like the quote. Scott says, Claude is so essential to every activity I do all day long. The only way I would stop using it is if they pried it from my cold, dead hands. In fact, I was with Scott this past weekend. We actually happened to be traveling together. And, he was showing me the hundreds of times per day that he uses these tools across all sorts of things in different kinds of casework. It's absolutely amazing. My wife was actually an attorney, and I primarily work with law firms and attorneys around AI. So a little bit about who I am. And as Diane said, look, I am the CEO of a company called Intelligence by Intent. At this point, I have presented and trained over 2,500 different attorneys on AI and how they use it and some best practices. I do keynote presentations. I've actually presented in front of Fortune 50 companies, the California Bar Associations, the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers I'm speaking at in a couple of weeks. I was a senior executive in technology for many, many years. I was a CFO. I was an SVP. I have an MBA from Wharton. And I really have spent these last 3 years going very deep into AI and really figuring out how companies use it. And what you'll see over the course of this presentation is I'm not going to focus on legal specific tools. I'm not going to talk about Harvey and Clio and those. I'm going to talk about the general large language models that everybody has access to, right? And most people know about ChatGPT. It's the most popular one that's out there. There is another really popular one, especially among lawyers, called Claude from a company called Anthropic. And there's a third one out there, Gemini from Google. These are really considered the big three that are out there that most organizations use. I thought I'd throw that out there up front as I talk about these, and I'll go in depth into all these tools in a little while, but I wanted you to have that in background. So again, I'm based in Los Angeles, and if you notice, there's a theme. You'll see St. Bernards. I have a giant St. Bernard who's actually sleeping at my feet right over there, and there's a picture up there of my last one that passed away a few years ago. So with that, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to bounce back and forth between some interesting examples and slides because I like to make this more interactive, show you what these things can do. And the one way I like to start this is if any of you used any of these tools 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago, and you asked it to create an image for you or an infographic, it really couldn't do it, right? It couldn't do text. It couldn't create a diagram. Today, these tools from a single sentence can create unbelievable diagrams, process flows, text that look like this. So I actually asked it to, create an infographic that explains, corporate bankruptcy proceedings, right, for a Chapter 11 reorganization, something I could use as a courtroom exhibit, right? And it went through and literally from that simple prompt created this exact example. And I will show you this over the course of the presentation today, how you can use a tool like this. And this was actually done from Google, from their Gemini product. There's another example I will show you a little bit later also. You can actually build interactive applications now. So if I wanted to build a tool to help me did Chapter 11 analysis, whether you wanted to use Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, you can actually build interactive tools now through simple English language prompts. And you can see what I put here. I just said, build a mini app as an artifact that would be helpful to an attorney or a judge who specializes in bankruptcy. Showcase the power of what Claude can do. And it built this interactive app. And again, I will show you what it can do there. And another really good example is timelines. And so I was actually working with a workers' comp firm out here in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. And we said, gee, it's a lot of times we'll get, 100 or 300 or 500 medical documents. It would be great if we could use this to build a timeline of activities or a sequence of what happened. And we showed, hey, how could we put all this data in there and have it build us a timeline across the years so we could look at things like primary care visits or specialist visits and understand what the diagnosis was. So most people think about these tools as just creating text and you having a conversation. What I want to highlight up front is there's a lot of interactivity that these tools have built in. And again, whether you're using, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you can see that there. So let me talk about the agenda today for a second. I want to start with a couple of core concepts that I think everyone working with law should understand, right? And there's only, three things I'm really going to talk about, as you'll see. They're pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go into a lot of technical depth, but there are just three basic concepts that I want people to understand. And then I'm going to go into really how you can use these leading platforms. As I said, I'm going to talk about ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. I know a lot of companies have Copilot from Microsoft. Look, they don't have their own models. They actually use ChatGPT and Claude behind the scenes in their models. And to be perfectly frank, their implementation just isn't as good as what you can get if you subscribe to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. So I generally don't cover it in these presentations. If and when they finally catch up, I will absolutely do that. But at the moment, they aren't there. Then a really important topic around how to use these tools privately and securely, across, the teams, the enterprise plans. There have been some rulings recently that, basically disallow most people to use the consumer versions, even if you pay for it. And we'll talk about that. And what I tell all my clients is you need to be on a teams or enterprise plan to have the kind of confidentiality and data security so that you can actually use these tools. The bulk of the presentation will be on practical use cases. As I said, I will go in and I will demo a lot of these things live. I think seeing the power of these tools live is what makes it come to life for people. And again, as we do that, I hope that raises, a lot of questions for people. And I'll talk about a couple of frameworks at the end, how you actually use these tools. And what I tell people is think about it this way. When you are using, ChatGPT, and I'll just use ChatGPT generically to represent all of them, right? When you think about ChatGPT, think about it as an incredibly smart, like second year associate that's working in your organization that has a really good domain of knowledge and has been trained on kind of everything under the sun, but doesn't necessarily have your context or your insight or your approach. And you want to explain things to them. You want to have a conversation with them. And the better conversation you have with them and the more context you give them, the better the results will be that you get out of these tools. And I'll just end with a couple of closing thoughts as we go through there. So, and you'll notice I've actually picked sort of like a 1950s home robotics theme. I actually think this works well to, kind of make the diagrams simple and straightforward. And I think they resonate with people. But, you know, all these tools really started with the public about, late 2023, right? And I called it here the dawn of the Chat-O-Matic, right? The first implementations of ChatGPT 3.5 came out. You saw the first chatbot. Google came out with a tool called Bard, their version of it, which candidly wasn't very good back then. And then Claude came out with, their version, or Anthropic came out with Claude. And those were really simple tools, right? And in the early days, what those tools do is they had been trained on everything on the internet, and they were basically answer engines. They would say, hey, here's the question this person's asking me. Let me go look at all the training data that I've ever gotten, and let me try and figure out, how to give them the best answer just based on what I've been trained on, right? Across 2024, these tools got better. They started getting some multimedia capabilities. They could start to understand images and sound, a little bit of video and things like that. They got a lot faster. And at the beginning of 2025, we got these reasoning versions of these tools. And we'll go into this more in a minute. DeepSeek, if you remember a little over a year ago, kind of scared everybody and said, wow, these tools, you can actually see them think now. And what they do is they break down the problem that you're working on. And again, you'll see this in the real examples. They can analyze what's happening, and the context windows got bigger. So over the years, we've added more and more and more and more skills to the point where we are today, where these things do deep reasoning, deep logic. They can call on tools. They can build programs. They can, they can do research on the web. They can synthesize things. They can generate complete reports. They can automate Excel and PowerPoint to do all sorts of things that most people don't know yet. And, we talk about them becoming agentic. We're basically, they're able to operate on their own, and they will do things. So there's a continual evolution. And even in the last 3 months, we've seen just massive leaps in performance, in reasoning and capability. And we're basically on a time frame now where every 3 months we're seeing gigantic leaps in what these tools can do. So as I said, there are kind of 3 technical terms I want to talk about. These are the 3 terms. They're not deeply technical, and I'll give them to you in hopefully pretty simple language. The 3 things I want to talk about are the context window, which is how long of a chat you can have. I want to go just a little bit deeper on reasoning models. And I do want to talk about hallucinations, because hallucinations is still a problem. And this is where, attorneys can still get in trouble as they're going through and using these tools. So let me start with context window. So context window, think of it as it's an AI short-term memory. How long of a conversation can I have with my AI tool before it forgets things, right? If I upload a lot of documents, if I've got a lot of depositions and a lot of declarations and a lot of exhibits, and I've got a lot of judgments that I put in here, and I want to have a conversation about those, right? It limits the memory. And effectively what happens is they start to forget. So as you'll see on the next page, they have a limited number of pages that they can sort of hold in working memory. And then what happens is if you keep the conversation going, they forget the beginning of the conversation. So you think, wow, why did they forget that? Because we've talked about it. So I just want to highlight that because it's really important to know. And the way to think about it is like this. And as I said, I'll talk about the 3 common models. These are the most recent models from these companies, ChatGPT 5.2, Claude Opus 4.6, and Gemini 3.1 Pro. These are the flagship models that are out there today. They talk about things like context windows and tokens and words. Look, I like to put it in pages. It's something that we all understand. It resonates with us. So with ChatGPT 5.2, you can have just under about a 400-page conversation. So if you think about the things you've uploaded, the things you're asking about, it's a pretty lengthy conversation that you can have there, right? With Claude Opus 4.6, you can have about a 600-page conversation, right? A little bit longer. And they're actually really good at remembering all the pages that you put in there. And then there's Gemini, which can have about a 3,000-page conversation. So Gemini often talks about the size of the context window. All these companies are working on expanding it. In fact, Claude Opus actually has one that's also 1 million tokens right now, about 3,000 pages that they're testing with their largest customers. I expect them to roll that out pretty soon. And ChatGPT will be there soon. So when these tools started 2-3 years ago, right, you could have a 6 or 8 or a 10-page conversation. You couldn't have this massive lengthy conversation that you can have today. And that's one of the reasons that these tools have gotten so much more effective. And the way I like to explain this is I have kids. I was telling Diane earlier, I have two in college. I got one in high school. They all love to read the Harry Potter books. So I try to put it in the context that they understand. And so if you think about a typical Harry Potter book being, just under 500 pages long, right? ChatGPT can have about 1.5 Harry Potter books in a conversation, right? Claude can have, a little bit less than that now. And then Gemini can have about 6 of those books in there, right? So there's a real difference in terms of what they can actually put in there, in terms of like what can be in their memory that you can have a conversation on. So again, hopefully all these concepts make sense, and please ask questions if questions come up. The one thing I want to mention is reasoning versus non-reasoning models. So again, when these tools started, when ChatGPT first came out, when Bard from Google first came out, when the first Claude models came out, they were trained on everything on the internet. Every document that was out there, every book that was out there, every, audio recording that was out there. And they were effectively an answer engine. People used to refer to these as, hey, they were called token generators. They're just guessing what that next best word is or the best token is to give you an answer. And that's literally what they were, right? But we've built reasoning engines. We've given them the ability to break down a problem, to break it down into steps, to think about how do I really answer the question the user was asking? I want to have step A, step B, step C, things like that, right? So there are two types of models that are out there still, although almost all of them at this point are reasoning models, to be perfectly honest. And I would encourage you to only use reasoning models, right? You still have the opportunity to use some of the older non-reasoning ones, but when you're using these tools to take advantage of all the power that they have and the great thinking and the great writing, just use reasoning models. So if you're using ChatGPT 5.2 or Gemini 3 or Claude Opus 4.6, these are all reasoning models and you're going to get the power of those. So the last technical term I just want to talk about is hallucination. And you've probably heard this and you've probably heard warnings about this where, people still give, they file a brief with the court. It's filled with fake citations. I actually read about a brand new case today that this happened in. And as they've developed these reasoning capabilities, they've gotten a lot better at eliminating hallucinations because the tools can think. They can go analyze what they're writing. They can say, hey, let me go search about that and see if that's accurate. And they are a lot better than they used to be, but they can still make mistakes. So please, please, please know that they can make mistakes. And the reason they do this is when they were built, their instructions are, hey, I want to please the user. I really want to give them an answer. And so even if they don't really know the answer, they're going to come up with something that they think might be the answer, and they might create some plausible sounding facts out of thin air. So again, they've gotten a lot better at doing this. In fact, I have an entire prompt and I'm happy to share it with people. And I'll show it to you in the real world where you can upload a document and it will actually go through every single line of what you upload, look at every fact, look at every assertion, and it will do its best to go verify it, either through other things you've uploaded or find information on the web. And they will give you a confidence score of how confident it is that that's accurate. So be super careful about asking for cases. What I tell everybody is, look, go use official sources, go use LexisNexis or, whatever tool you happen to subscribe to when you're looking for cases. Please don't ask these tools for cases. That's still where the giant amount of hallucination can still exist. So that's my caveat there, to be careful. This is one technical chart I want to put in just on how smart these tools are, right? And they are really getting smarter all the time. In fact, Google just took a big leap. So this is an artificial intelligence or artificial analysis intelligence index, right? When this is this looks across, I think it's 9 different public benchmarks that are basically PhD level questions that the AIs can't train on, right? So they've come up with these problems from PhD experts and they say, okay, these large language models have not seen these problems before. What percent of these problems out of 100 can they actually solve, right? And if you look down here, a score of 57, which is the state of the art, means the model can basically get, 57% of these advanced test problems across all these different domains, across, chemistry and physics and reasoning and writing and humanities last exam. And these are, again, PhD level questions. The average human would score 0 on this, just so you all know. So you can see how these have evolved in the last year. Because, basically a year ago, we were down here at about a quarter of the problems, and you can see how it's evolved over time. Gemini 3 Pro was released last November, right? Which was at that time state of the art. We kept getting little incremental improvements. They just released this model last week on Thursday, and they're up to 60%. So we are seeing, again, massive improvements in intelligence. Now, this doesn't mean that they're perfect at all things, but they are getting better and better, and they're improving all the time. And this time horizon you're looking at here is maybe 18 months of improvement. So there's been a wild jump in what they can do. So I want to jump into an example. So to me, these things come to life when you see how these tools work. And I'm going to show you examples across the different tools. Now, I have pre-built a bunch of these in Claude. So I'm going to use either Gemini or ChatGPT to do some other things. But one of the examples that you might have to face is, hey, how do I help determine, the best chapter, whether it should be chapter 7, chapter 13. I want to go analyze someone's income, their assets, their debts, their goals, and explain the trade-offs to them so we can help make an informed decision. And so what I've done here is I've got a number of these problems throughout here, and I've got a bunch of other examples as well, but I've built a prompt here. And so normally in that prompt, you'd see, hey, I want to analyze whether this client should file chapter 7 or chapter 13, right? You would normally load some income, some information about them, how many dollars per month they get gross, does their spouse have income, right? Is their household size, what state are they in? What are their assets? What are their debts? Right? What are their goals? Do they want to keep their home or do they want to surrender a home, right? Do they want to keep their car? Do they want to catch up on arrears? What are they trying to do? And ultimately, I wanted to generate, a means test, right? Does the client pass chapter 7? If not, projected disposable income, right? What's their asset protection, right? What's their chapter 7 outcome, the chapter 13 outcome? So you can build these complex prompts. And again, a year ago, you would have been hard pressed to do this. Today, you can more easily do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab here I'm going to go into Gemini here. I'm going to actually grab this prompt. I'm going to paste it in like this. I'm going to grab these. I'm going to switch, make sure I'm on the pro model here. I'm going to paste in this prompt and I'm going to go grab the documents here from off to the side. This is everything in chapter 1. The number 1 question here. I'll drop those in here and I'm going to go ahead and say go. And what you'll see is it's going to say, okay, I'm going to load up all these documents. And what I did is I created content similar to what you would have, from an actual client. So a lot of these examples, I've got some pre-done content built in. But while that's running, I'm just going to go open up Claude here. And I'm going to go into, I created a project here for the ACBC. And I'm going to go load up question 1. So I want you to see, you get different kinds of output from different tools here. And so you can see here, look, I pasted all the stuff in here. I'll sort of scroll back a little bit. And so it went through and said, hey, here's the bankruptcy analysis for the Martinez family, right? Here's the case ID. Here's the means test analysis, right? Here's the Arizona median income comparison, right? So you can see it's going through, and you'll see in a second, Gemini will do the same thing. The asset protection analysis, right? The chapter 7 outcome projection, right? All these things here. And then chapter 13 outcome projection, all the things we asked for, recommendation, chapter 7 is a clear choice. Here's why. Addressing the Honda Civic issue, it creates a really nicely formatted, logical thing. And I asked it to create a client explanation. Dear Robert Maria, after reviewing your financial situation, I recommend chapter 7. Here's why in plain terms, right? And it goes through and it does this, right? And it helps you when you're thinking about complex issues to go through and make this recommendation to them. So over here in Gemini, right? So it's going through and it's actually going to go do this entire analysis, right? And again, it's going to go piece by piece. So it actually came back and it said, hey, for the means test, the client's realized gross household income was over the preceding 6 months compared against all this stuff. So this one is, not as detailed as the one in Claude, right? So in this case, I would want to use Claude as the tool versus using Gemini as the tool for this, but it would drive you to the same answers and the same output. And we can do the same thing in ChatGPT. So sometimes some tools do a better job than others. One of the things that you'll see throughout the course of the day is I typically don't recommend different tools. I don't focus on them in general, and because every tool is a little bit different depending on what their strengths are. Right now, for a lot of knowledge work and for a lot of the law firms, Claude has become the tool of choice. Its writing, its reasoning, its ability to put things in Word documents and PowerPoint and Excel, as you'll see, is exceptional compared to what some of the other tools are doing. But it's a great example to show you a little bit about, hey, how can these tools work and what can they do? So the last slide in this section before I actually go into these tools, look, this is my reminder. AI doesn't have a bar number, you do, right? If you put in a submission to a court that has an error in it that's fabricated, the AI is not going to stand in front of the judge. The judge doesn't care what AI did. You will, right? They don't have a reputation. They don't have malpractice insurance. They don't have a career built case by case over decades, right? So my one rule, no exceptions. And please adhere to this. If you don't take anything else away from this presentation, take the 4th line down. Human review has to happen after your final AI modification, not before, right? Whatever you put into AI, you have to put your name on it after it's done. Review it, look at it. Look, most of what comes out is exceptional and it's really good. And, most often there won't be many mistakes, but it can still make mistakes. So again, please do it. It doesn't matter how sophisticated your prompts are, how many safeguards you built in place, it can still make issues. So again, your name goes in that line. Please, please, please review anything at the end of this. It is super, super important as we do this. So I want to spend, 30 to 45 minutes now, just like looking at these platforms and what they can do, because again, not everybody will have seen these things. And these companies keep adding capabilities all the time. In fact, Claude added a brand new capability today to do scheduled tasks, which they actually didn't have before. So we're going to go into these three tools. We'll start with ChatGPT, which is the most common one. Most people have used it before. Most people actually haven't heard of Claude, which is too bad because, as I said, I think you'll see by the end of this, it is an incredibly powerful tool. It has become my daily driver, and most of the lawyers I work with, actually, it's become their daily driver for many things. And then Google's Gemini is amazing on infographics and deep research and deep reasoning analysis and things like that. So let's start with ChatGPT, and I'm looking over in the chat. I don't see any questions. At least, hopefully, I'm looking in the right chat. If I'm not, someone raise your hand and tell me. But again, happy to make this interactive. So let's talk about ChatGPT. The latest version is version 5.2 of their flagship model. Although if I'd given this presentation tomorrow, rumor is they're going to drop a big update tomorrow, which will probably be 5.3, although it might be 5.5. We'll find out. It is by far the most well-known brand in AI, right? It was the first one to reach, 100 million users. You can see it took just 2 months when they launched this product in November 2022 to January 2023. You can see by comparison how long it took Netflix and Facebook and Instagram, right? That was an unbelievable milestone, right? Same thing on the enterprise side. Within 1 year of launching, right, 90% of the Fortune 500 was using ChatGPT in some capacity. As you'll see as we go through this, Claude is actually getting tremendous traction in enterprises now because of its Claude Code and other things that it does. But it's a great tool. Look, all these are great tools. And if you pick one, honestly, you can't go wrong with any of them. They just have different strengths and weaknesses. And I'm happy to talk about that at the end. So what's in ChatGPT? First of all, most people know it has a chat interface, right? You can actually chat with different models. If I open up ChatGPT here, and I say, I can pick my model here. I've got auto, instant, thinking, pro, got some old models up here. The interface is pretty common, and they all have interfaces like this, right? They have a thing called GPTs, which we'll talk about in a minute, and they have projects. So I'm going to go through some of these things, throughout the course of this presentation. It does excellent image creation, as you'll see. It does video creation. They've got a tool called Sora. One of my favorite capabilities is called deep research, and we'll show an example of what deep research can do. As I said, it can do scheduled tasks, study and learn. It can connect to corporate systems. If you've got email, whether it's on Google or on Microsoft Outlook, it can connect to your email, your SharePoint. They are continuing to build in capabilities again and again and again. So as I said, the interface looks like this, right? So, and I'll just go to mine live. Just so you know, and I'll actually, let me go one page ahead to talk about the models because I'm going to come back to this, right? So you have choices when you use ChatGPT, just like in the other models. They have introduced a model called ChatGPT Auto, which in their view, they try to select the best model for your task, balancing speed and capability. So they will basically say, hey, based on the question you put in, I'm going to internally route it to a fast model, a thinking model, a kind of a pro model, right? It'll try and do its best job to do it. Look, my personal experience, and this is my experience, and a lot of people that have worked with it too, is it'll typically try and route you to like the least cost compute model, right? It tries to find the least amount of power it can give you to answer your question. And honestly, that's not what I want. And my guess is by the time you finish this presentation, that's not what you're going to want either, right? You're going to want it to actually do the thinking. You want the reasoning. You want it to actually figure out what you're trying to do and give you the best answer it can, right? They have a model called Instant, which is the fastest model for straightforward questions and simple tasks. Look, if you want to just ask it who won the Super Bowl last year, you can go to Instant, right? But when I said earlier about non-reasoning models, where they're just going to give you an answer based on their training data and not think about it, that's what Instant is. Look, I never use it, to be perfectly honest. It's just not valuable to me because if I have a question like that, I'm going to go use Google and just say who won the Super Bowl last year, right? Thinking model is where I spend all my time, right? This is where you get the power of all the reasoning, and it will break things down step by step. And you have different levels of thinking depending on what you're doing. And if you have a pro subscription on the consumer side or on the enterprise side, you get access to their pro model, right? Which is their by far their most advanced thinking model. It does the best reasoning of any model that's out there. I use it at least a couple of times a day for very complex questions. You can put in incredibly detailed analysis and insight and questions, and it will logic through the most complex things and give you incredible, incredible results. So for purposes of the demoing today, I'll leave things in auto, but normally I have mine default to thinking. And then you have different levels, again, depending on your subscription. If you're on a Teams or Enterprise, you'll probably have standard or extended. I have another one in here called Heavy because I have a Pro subscription. Um, my default is I leave things on extended because, again, this is where I want the best answers. This is what I do, right? If I'm asking a question and I want to add, photos and files, I can add that from here too. So if I want to go add, photos to my document, I can click that. I can add it. If I have my Google Drive connected, or if I had OneDrive connected, if I want to create an image or deep research, and I'll show you some of these as well, right? Web search is on by default. You don't need to turn it on anymore. There are some other things. They have study and learn things. There's an agent mode if you wanted to try and control your browser. So I'm not going to show you all these different things, but I just want to show you that they're here and what you can do on all these different things. So if I go forward here, so custom GPTs. So this is something that they introduced early on. A custom GPT is sort of a mini version of ChatGPT with a set of instructions. So if there is a thing that you do again and again and again, if you basically put in, if you like to do fact checking, I will show you my fact checking GPT, right? So I don't have to type those instructions again and again. Or if you've uploaded a set of case law that you refer to all the time, and you don't want to have those same instructions, you can create a custom GPT, and they sit over here on the left. So you can see I've done ones for like family law, for client intake. I have one that looks for human written versus AI written. I have a detailed fact checker. I have a text importer, right? Things like that, or text improver. So I'll give you an example on the text improver one. Let's say, for example, that I had some text and someone was angry at me, and I want to, I don't want to respond in a bad way. I could say, hey, I got a really angry letter from this client. I'm really annoyed at them, and I want to write a response, and I'm really ticked off. So, give me a nice response. By the way, you'll see I tend to talk to my computer. I have a talking thing on here. So what this will do is I probably wouldn't want this going back to a client like this, and maybe I had sworn I'm really pissed off at them. I'm going to say go. It's going to go look at this and say, hey, please send the client's letter, paste what you have below. Thank you for your letter. I understand you're frustrated. I want to ensure your concerns are addressed properly. To do so, I need to separate the specific issue. So again, it's going to basically, straighten out what I'm doing. So I have these instructions that I use again and again. So I don't have to write this. And I'll show you the fact checker one. I also have it on the project side, but again, they're super useful for when you want to, again, just have something that is, the same instructions. So they have another tool called projects. And I will spend some time on projects, and Claude has projects too. And this is something that I would expect almost everyone on this call to use. So think of a project as a dedicated workspace, right? So you're working on a client and you want to have all the things related to that client in that particular project. So you go into ChatGPT, and I'll show you, you go create a project there, and then you can upload files related to that client. You can have conversations about that client, and everything is threaded together. So if you go over here, I have a number of projects for different clients. And so I've got one for the AML coming up. I've got a workers' comp one. But if I say new project and I just say ACBC over here, one thing that's really important to note when you're thinking about a project here is see the little settings button right here? Click on the settings button. And this is all about memory. So ChatGPT has introduced memory where you can have memory across all the different chats you've had and things like that. But if you're working on a particular client, you really don't want that to happen. You want it to only have memory of the other chats about that client, because you wouldn't want to basically have ChatGPT muddle client A and client B and client C stuff together. So you'd say, hey, I want project only memory on this, and I want to create a project. And so with this project now, you could click on add files, and it would go add files into this directory. And you could add, I think, up to 40 files, per client. And then you could actually add custom instructions. If I come up here, I can say, hey, in my settings, what are my instructions about this particular project, right? I want to basically, always refer to, these lines in the legal code, or this lines in the tax code. And I want to actually have this common set of ways I respond to this all the time. So again, these project settings are really useful. I use them all the time with clients. You're seeing my personal one that I use for demos. I've got a complete enterprise setup that I use for my enterprise clients, and I just don't like to share that stuff out here. So I will show you this, this fact checker one that I've got, because this is really useful. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where see, every threaded conversation I've had now is part of this. So every conversation I've had in this project is in here. And what's really useful is I can actually go back and look at one of these things. And I'm going to say, I'm going to go pull up an old one. I want to go look at, let's see, which one's a good one to go back here to? Well, I don't know. I'll pick the tool comparison summary. I don't know which one this one even did here. But basically what I did is I can go in here, I can paste in an entire conversation, right? Here's a whole article that was being written on this stuff. And what it will do is it will look at every single fact and assertion in this document, and it will tell me, it'll give me a rating. Hey, here's the claim. Codex includes a local CLI that can read, modify your repo, and run commands. Verdict, yeah, it's 100%. And it gives me the actual source notes, right? So when I talked earlier about hallucinations, this is a tool I use all the time. When I'm writing an article or sending something to a client, I run it through this detailed fact checker because it will go through and give me an assessment of everything that's in here. It's funny, I actually happened to pick one that was quite high in terms of what it was able to do. Oh, this is one. This is a good one. Someone wrote this article about OpenAI, and I said, you know what? I think this article is kind of BS. There's a lot of garbage in here, and I disagree with it. So I dumped it in here, and I basically said, hey, go run a fact check on this article for me, right? And again, you can put in a memo in here, a brief in here, and you'll see here the accuracy table. Okay, this one, 95% accurate. Hey, they claimed OpenAI nearly went bankrupt, had a $6 billion investor bailout. That was completely untrue, and I knew that. And this, detailed fact checker pick it up, right? So it's like, hey, zero, not true. And this one is 65% likely, 50%. So as you're working on documents, this is a great tool to use. So again, anyone that wants this, please just email me. My email's at the end of the presentation. I happily share this with everybody. I use this on a daily basis. You can either have it as a GPT if you don't want to have all the content like the threaded conversations together, if you want it to be one-off, or you can set it up as a project. But again, super helpful, but hopefully you get a little bit of a sense of how projects work. Claude has those as well. And so I've covered these. Image creation is amazing in ChatGPT. So you can actually go in and I can actually go in, like I've got a bunch of images I've already created, right? I did this one yesterday. I did this one the day before for an article. So you can just describe things and create images, right? You can create super realistic images. You can create cartoonish images. So if you need an image for something, right, it's a great way to go through and make images happen in this tool. And again, the prompt here was, create an image of a lawyer in a court, talking about bankruptcy in the style of the 1950s, home robotics, all of the Jetsons, right? So that's the image that I got there. I don't use the ChatGPT image generator for infographics because, as you'll see, Google's Gemini is much better at that. But it's a great way to use the tool. You can see from my examples that I use it quite frequently. All right, video creation. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm just going to take a sip of water here, and I'll let you guys take a look at the slide. By the way, I know I talk fast, so I have a lot of content to go through. So if people want me to slow down, again, please let me know. I'm not going to do a video creation example here. They launched a tool called Sora. It's OpenAI's video and audio generation model that creates very, very realistic videos from text descriptions. Google has one called VO. I think they're up to 3.1. Grok has one if people are using Grok. There are some famous ones out there now called Dance, which lets you do absolutely stunning, Hollywood quality level videos. Everyone's moving in this direction as they become multimodal, but it's a great capability. So again, I keep clicking above. Here we go. Did video creation, deep research. This is something that's really powerful. I'm going to show you this. When ChatGPT launched deep research and when Google launched deep research, this changed the game for companies. And what deep research is, it's like you having an entire group of analysts at your beck and call that will go off on any particular topic and go research all the latest information. It will search the web. It will synthesize things. It will put together financial analysis. It will make projections. It will do whatever you ask. And it will go run and give you, an incredibly comprehensive report anywhere from, I think I put on here 5 to 15 minutes. I mean, I've had them run as long as 30 or 40 minutes. This is one of the most powerful capabilities of these tools. And so I put together a pretty simple one. I said, and I will show you the outputs from these different tools here. I said, go summarize all the significant changes to consumer bankruptcy practices from recent case law, local rules, and legislative proposals in Arizona over the past 12 months, and explain how each one affects day-to-day practice. So if you think about that request, right? To go off and do that request, for you or someone on your staff would take a fair amount of time. You'd go do some research, you'd look for the answers, you'd probably read a lot of different things, and you would synthesize the results. So I fired this off because I said, these take, 10, 20 minutes to do. In fact, I'm going to grab this. I'll go fire this off again just so you can see how this starts out here. I'm going to say new chat. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say this is a deep research. I'm going to fire it off here and I'm just going to say go. And so you'll see here, it's going to come back with an outline in a second. It's going to say, okay, hey, here's what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go collect Arizona federal and state statutes and proposed bills from the past 12 months, search the Ninth Circuit and Arizona Bankruptcy Court opinions from the past 12 months, review Arizona bankruptcy. So I could edit this, by the way, if I think there's something that it's missing, right? Survey practitioner courses, CLEs, local bar summaries, and I will synthesize the changes. And I would just say start, right? It's going to go off now and it's going to go do all of these things for me. So again, this is an absolutely incredible use case. And so I already ran this. If you'll see here, if I click on the X here, right, I literally did the same thing. It took 31 minutes to run, right? It did 252 different searches. It's going to reference 18 different citations. So if I open this up, it's got sort of the index of all the things over here, right? And it has here, here's an executive summary over the past 12 months. The most practice-shaping developments for consumer bankruptcy in the District of Arizona have clustered in 4 areas, right? Tighter regulation of Chapter 7 debtor attorney fee agreements, mortgage servicing procedure overhaul, major Arizona exemption statute rewrite, and recurring U.S. trustee program updates to means test inputs, right? So this is ChatGPT's summary, sources and methodologies, case law developments, right? Fantasia versus Deodata, right? I'm not going to read all this. I'm just showing you what these tools can do. It's amazing. And when you subscribe to the teams or the enterprise versions, you effectively have an unlimited amount of deep research queries that you can go run to use for your day-to-day practice. I ran the same query in Google's Gemini. Again, they have also an amazing deep research capability, right? You see they often put in numbers, they'll put in tables in here, they'll put in charts. I would say Google's Gemini one is definitely a little more interactive now than the ChatGPT one, but you get to see some really great examples of how this works, right? They've got, different approaches and stuff. I read the same thing in Claude, right? Claude also has a deep research capability. They have improved theirs a lot. And again, I'm happy to share these so you guys can see the documents, you can compare outputs, but you can kind of go run your own queries as well. I would say I generally find the output you get from ChatGPT and Gemini to be pretty lengthy. They're usually 20 to 30 page reports. The ones I get out of Claude are definitely more synthesized. They're usually more in like sort of like this 7 to 10, whoop, sorry, my phone heard me talking. They're generally shorter. They're generally sort of like in the 7 to 10 page report, right? But you can see here, they went through 480 sources, right? For 7 minutes and 57 seconds. I don't remember what what this one did. Actually, I think they show it at the very, very bottom here. I mean, they went through sources used in the report. By the way, they even will tell you sources read but not used in the report, right? Which is interesting. And then it'll actually even show you its thinking and its structure. So if you want to understand kind of what did it go through, what did it do? So if you're curious as to how this works, these tools can actually show you that. And then there is another tool out there that some people have heard about called Perplexity. I generally don't talk about Perplexity that often. I generally think of it as an enhanced Google search. It is very, very good at search, and they've bolted on some large language models onto the end. They've bolted on, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and you can use different ones. They have definitely improved their deep research, but again, I don't find it quite as detailed as the ones I get out of Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude. But if people are aware of it, I just want you to be aware that there is another tool out there you can subscribe to that you can get that content from. So again, when I show this to people, like when I've shown this to private equity firms and to valuation firms and to accounting firms, right? The kind of content, the kind of questions you can ask are astounding. And you can ask, you could ask a 40 question research prompt and it will go off and it will do all of it. So this is an extraordinarily simple one that I use for purposes of this demo, but you can ask extremely complex things. Something else that is very, very useful is scheduled tasks. So let's say, for example, that one of those pieces of the law you wanted to follow on a regular basis. So ChatGPT and Gemini, and literally as of today, now Claude, all have scheduled tasks. So what you can do, you can just go in and type something as simple as, hey, I'm interested in following this legislative update. Actually, let's go grab one. Let's go back to the beginning of this one because they had the summaries here. And let's just go grab this. And if I go into ChatGPT, I'm going to say, I want to create a scheduled task. And so every Friday at 9 a.m., I want to see the latest research on this topic. And I'm going to paste in, that. And I'm going to say, let me switch this to auto just again for purposes of speed here. And so the key to making a scheduled task, by the way, is to give it a day. And you could say daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you wanted to do. I just said every Friday. I could say every other Friday or once a month, and give it what you want to do. And you say go. And what will happen is it will now put these scheduled tasks down in Pulse. So I'm actually not going to say go. I don't need this added to my scheduled tasks, but I just want you to know that they are there. And let me see if I pop into Pulse here. Actually, yeah, I don't want to go edit it. So, but just know that it's there, that will actually run these scheduled tasks. They're super useful. I've got a bunch of ones running for AI research and for legal research and for different things that I work on. And again, they're now all available and they are super, super useful to go access. This is another capability in ChatGPT, and it's also available in Claude and in Gemini that most people don't know exists. That if you're working on documents, is unbelievably useful, and it's called Canvas. And in Claude, they actually call it artifacts, and in Google Gemini, they call it Canvas. So normally, if you've used ChatGPT in the past or Claude or Gemini, when you're typing, you have a conversation, it gives you an answer, you type again, it's an elongated chat window, right? That's not how most of us work. Most of us work in documents, right? And that's what we want to be doing. And so what they added is they added an ability here. I'm just going to clear this, make it a new chat. And again, I'll do auto for speed. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to select more. Whoop, and I'm going to say Canvas. And I'm going to just tell it something simple and funny. I'm going to say, hey, give me a 5 paragraph summary about the history of St. Bernards and what they're like in the winter. And I'm going to say go. And so it's going to go think really quickly. And what you can see right now already is there's something different here. You can see that it says here, copy, edit, download. And that doesn't show up when you are having a normal conversation. In fact, I'm going to go do the exact same thing here just in Gemini. So you can see the results here in Gemini. I'm going to just paste this in. I'm going to say make this canvas because I'll just kind of compare and contrast here. And so it gave me this, this draft. And now if I hit edit over here, you'll see it sort of moved it into this document style window on the right hand side. And what's really nice is on the bottom right, there's a pencil. So it will make suggested edits for me. I can adjust the length of it automatically. I could change the reading level. I could say, hey, the current reading level is probably, get set at 8th grade. If I want to move it up to PhD level, I can do that. If I want to make it sort of kindergarten level, I can do that. I'm going to leave it there for the moment because what's really useful about the document structure in Canvas mode is, again, let's say you just want to go edit 1 paragraph, right? In normal ChatGPT conversations, if you say, hey, go edit this 1 paragraph, you'll see it rewrite the entire document. If I just want to go look at this one, I can highlight it and you'll see here now it says ask ChatGPT. I can say, hey, I want you to rewrite this in the style of a kindergarten story, right? Again, I'll use simple examples here that are kind of funny. And what you'll see happening now is it'll take whatever I asked it to do and simply look at that 1 paragraph and rewrite just that 1 paragraph. So you can see here, now it says St. Bernards are very, very big dogs. Some of them are as heavy as a grown-up person, even more. So you saw it left everything else exactly the same. And now if you come up here, you can sort of see the changes that were made. So just like in a Word doc, you have the history of changes. So it's a super powerful mechanism. So as you're working on briefs to the court or things back to a client, right? I would encourage you to use Canvas mode. It's awesome. It lets you easily copy stuff. You can share it with people, right? You see previous versions. You can actually now download this into a PDF or a Word doc from here or Markdown. So again, a really powerful use case. And you'll see here that Gemini here has exactly the same thing. This is, I can go again, highlight a simple paragraph in here. I can say, ask Gemini, and I could just say, hey, rewrite this in language that would befit a kindergartner. And it will go just rewrite that 1 paragraph. And if you are a Google Docs organization, I know a lot of law firms are, you'll see here, this now looks like Google Docs up here, and it is. So they're incorporating this structure with Google Docs. You can see here, it just rewrote that one paragraph in here. And now I actually have editing tools, right? So I actually have bolding and italics and bulleted lists. So they're really making it like a true document that you can edit. So again, if you're using these tools, most people don't know that that capability exists. It's a super great feature. Let me go run a second example here, this means test calculator, right? Because again, I like to show real world examples. So, means testing is complex. Finding legitimate deductions to qualify for Chapter 7 or reduce Chapter 13 payments requires careful analysis. So one of the things I'm doing here is I'm giving you lengthy prompts to use these examples, to see these examples, right? So I'm telling it, calculate the means test and identify optimization opportunities. Normally you would put in all these things, filing status information, income information, monthly expenses, and I want it to calculate current results. I want to do optimization, timing, character 13 projection. I'm going to grab all this. I'm going to go into ChatGPT this time. We'll go do a new prompt here. I'm going to paste this in. Let me go grab some sample documents from this so I can drop these in here. We'll let those load and we'll say go, but then I'll go pull up the one that I sort of pre-done in Claude. So again, you can see what these look like here. So let me go into Claude now and let me go grab number 2, the means test analysis. And so you can see, I mean, I literally dumped the exact same examples, the exact same prompt. I'll analyze the means test calculation for you, right? So it goes through, it does the current results from the means test calculation, right? Disposable income calculation, optimization of opportunities, timing, special circumstances. And one of the things that's really nice in Claude is Claude will create spreadsheets for you. So you'll see here, it said, hey, it actually created a means test for Rodriguez spreadsheet. If I click on this, it's now going to open it up over here. It actually created, the full spreadsheet calculation. It will do formulas if you want it to do formulas, right? You can see there's a formula up here. It's got the income page, the expense page, the optimization page, right? And I didn't tell it to create the spreadsheet. This is something that Claude does natively, or oftentimes it will create a Word document or a PowerPoint document. I also could have said, hey, I want you to create a spreadsheet for me. And the nice thing is I can come up here and I can say download, and I can actually download this as an Excel file, or I could actually add this to a project. So it is a really powerful way of doing this. ChatGPT is still going through this. I'll let it go for another second. Here we go. I will use the uploaded 2026 Arizona IRS standards and the 3 provided fact patterns to run the median test, how I'm going to do this. And this goes to some of my custom instructions that I have in ChatGPT. I always tell it to think about it first, tell me what it's going to do. So you can see here, it's sort of going piece by piece through this. And the reason I had done these Claude ones in advance is I didn't want to have, you didn't want to have to wait to see these different examples out here. But again, another really good example, and I'm going to leave all these prompts for all of you to see in here. So I'm going to switch to Claude now, and let me just take another sip of water really quick here. And I don't see any questions, but if I'm missing any, someone please just feel free to, let me just click on the participants chat. Yeah, I think I'm in the, yeah, I'm in the right one. Okay, give me one sec. So again, if you have questions, comments, I'm happy to answer anything you've got. So let's talk about Claude. So Opus 4.6 is their latest model. And as I said in the beginning, many people have not heard about Claude from a company called Anthropic. It was actually a bunch of folks that were originally at OpenAI. And by the way, a lot of them were originally at Google as well, before that even, that were really focused on safety. When Claude started, they were really focused on safety, and they were worried about, AGI and then ASI, which is artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. And so they wanted to build a tool that was really focused on making sure that people could use AI safely. This tool, as I said earlier, has really become the professional's choice, right? It is widely regarded as having the highest quality writing. And that's just not my opinion. That's most people that use this. A lot of surveys have come out recently, and for professionals, Claude is really becoming one of the #1 tools, especially if you're in law or accounting or valuation, or even private equity. It's a really, really powerful tool. It has great Office integrations now, as you see. It does a lot of amazing things with Excel and PowerPoint. In fact, they've actually built a tool into Excel that I will show you in a minute, which is also really, really incredible. And they've done a great job. So just like ChatGPT, as you've seen here, they have a chat interface, right? You can go in and, they've got, chats down the side. They've got projects. They've got artifacts. You can switch your model over here. Opus 4.6 is by far their most capable model. It's the one I use all the time. If I was doing office work, I would work on Sonnet here. And just like over here, let's close the chats over here, you can actually, add files, you can do research, you can, look at your connectors, things like that. It's a great, all these tools on the chat side have a very similar interface. They're very simple to use. They also have projects, just like ChatGPT does. So I won't go into there. I will say by default, their projects, the memory in them is really specific to them. You don't have to detect it. Their artifacts, I'll show you, are mini programs. They've got, styles, and they're great with research Microsoft Office docs. So there's a question. Which of the big three do you think is best for a law school student to use as a study aid? Well, that's a great question. Look, you honestly, you can't go wrong with all of them. They all do amazing work. If you are The advantage I would say of Google is Google has an amazing tool called Notebook LM, which I will show you, which when it comes to studying and putting in large documents is far and away the best tool out there. When you want to actually analyze lots and lots of content, that is an unbelievably good tool. So I'll show you that. So if you're good in the Google platform and you're happy with Gemini, I mean, again, you will see Notebook LM in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It is amazing. So, you can't go wrong with any of them. But for my personal usage today, just to be perfectly honest, where I am, if you had asked me 6 months ago, I was probably 80% ChatGPT and 10% Claude and 10% Gemini. Today, I'm probably 60% Claude, 30% Gemini, and 10% ChatGPT. And if they come up with the update tomorrow, who knows? Maybe things will switch. But we can have this conversation again at the end. But that's kind of my interim answer. So I just showed you the interface, right? This was from a screenshot a while ago that I had, but again, very similar interface to what you see on the others. They also have three models. So Opus 4.6, again, is their flagship model, is their most intelligent. If you use it, you burn a lot of tokens, right? And so you can actually go into Claude and see how many tokens you've used, so if you have the $20 a month subscription, right, you get a limited amount of questions you can ask in a day. I happen to pay for the max subscriptions in Team One, so I pay for a $200 one because I personally just don't like to run out of usage. I want to be able to use as much as I want. They have a incredibly capable mid-level model called Sonnet, and if I'm just doing Excel work or PowerPoint work or work with Word documents, I would definitely use Sonnet. Or if I'm doing agents and coding, it is really, really excellent in terms of speed and intelligence. And if you purely just wanted some very quick hit stuff for coding, they have a model called Haiku. Most professionals, lawyers aren't going to use that model. It's just really good for prototyping and for high volume workloads. Again, if you're doing agentic work and coding and things like that, which most people on this call probably would not be doing. So I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned the projects, right? So again, they're just these dedicated workspaces. You can add context, you can add instructions, you can have all these multiple chats. The beauty of when you're in a project in ChatGPT, if I go into, ACBC here, if I went into added a new chat and asked a question, it would actually have knowledge of all these other chats I've had in here. So that's what I'm saying. If you're working with a client and you want to have all their information in there, right? You can have the memory, you can have their instructions, you can add files. It's a really, really powerful way to work with these things. And again, I pre-built a bunch of examples in here just so I could find them. But again, it gives you good knowledge, of what these things can do. And they're very, very powerful. I won't go into this again, persistent context, custom instructions, you can build a knowledge base. So as you're having things in there, they're great. Artifacts are mini programs that you can build in Claude, and they are amazing. And I'm going to show you two of them. And actually, I'll show you a couple other examples as well as part of this because they are really useful to see. But you can actually tell Claude, hey, I need something that does this. So if there's a calculator that you built to do something for chapter 13 or chapter 7, or an analysis that you regularly do that maybe you built it in Excel or you built a mini program, you can actually have Claude build mini applications that you can actively use to go do things. And so if I go in here, I'm going to show you, if I click on my artifacts here, they have a bunch of pre-built ones. I'm going to go to my artifacts for a second. I'll show you two things here, and then I want to show you two others that were pre-done. But one of the things that Claude does exceptionally well is it builds absolutely beautiful interfaces. I think it builds some of the greatest content that's out there. And so if you're ever creating dashboards or things like that, it can do beautiful work. So I have an old one here. I uploaded an Apple 10K and I said, hey, I want to go create a dashboard of this 10K. And so I uploaded it. I literally just said, hey, I want you to go make a professional looking 10K. I want you to create a couple things. And so it created for me just uploading the 10K, this absolutely, beautiful dashboard. So if you ever want to summarize, some of your clients' content or tax returns or financials, right? You can actually have Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini create things. I just happen to find the current implementation of Claude gives you slightly better looking ones, although Gemini, to be candid, is a very, very close second. You can actually make these interactive. You can allow it to click on things. You can see it does a really, really good job of doing that. I've worked with sales organizations and created, like just sort of very high level territory maps. I'll pull one up here in a second, but I want to show you. See, this is what happens sometimes. Is right now, everyone is banging away on Claude, and sometimes like they're like, no, we're too busy, so come back in a minute. Hopefully it'll come back. Yeah. So if I go here to sales territory map, if I look at this here, I uploaded a bunch of sales territory data from a client that I work with. I get four sellers, Andrew, Dario, Michael, and then an updated one. And I said, hey, I want to know, what states are with each one. So I can sort of quickly visualize this and say, for my unknown person, which states are they going to have here, right? So I can say, hey, here's the rep I don't have yet. Here's what states they'll have. And again, this was a really, really simple prompt. I just said, I uploaded the data, can you make a map of the US that's shown these sales territories? Here's a list of the states, the territory names, and the names of the AE that manages that territory, right? So I told it really simply to go do this, right? It actually made different versions. This was the first one it made. I was like, oh, that's okay. I want to make it a little different. I want to make one that looks more like this. And you can see it didn't generate that one. So I'm like, hey, go try again, make me another one. Like, hey, that's a little bit better. So, I just kept sort of iterating on it saying, hey, which one do I like? And it, built the code and finally gave me that, that bottom one that I showed you a minute ago. So it really does a great job of doing that. But the two things I want to show you was first was this bankruptcy application. And I said to it, if I go back in here, I said, I want you to build an app that gives me sort of a case analysis, right? Where I can actually, upload some data, some case details, and have it do an extremely thorough analysis of that case. I can work on a claims waterfall. I can do a cram down analysis. I can do a case timeline. And the original instructions I gave it was literally, go build me an app that does these things. And then I asked it for some sample information so I could fill it out so you could see what it looks like. And so if I went and I grab this case analysis here and I paste this in here and I go say analyze, it's going to go off now and think about this and do this. And so this actually takes a minute or two. It actually does a lot of analysis in the back end. I'm going to pull up Claude again over here for a second. And I'm going to go grab here this timeline because this is also another really useful medical timeline. Another really good way that you can use these tools is I basically said, hey, I want to actually go through here. I uploaded all these different documents and it was all these different medical documents. You'll see here, if I look at, this was the prompt. I said, use HTML React, create this interactive timeline. Here's all these different doctor's visits, right? I sort of pasted them in as one thing, although I could have uploaded them as different documents. But I wanted to basically create an interactive timeline. Nope, come on back. Where'd my timeline go? Over here. Where I can see this and sort of understand what is happening. I know this is a little bit small to read. I'll try and make this bigger here, right? So, hey, I've got 26 primary care visits across these 9 years. I got specialist visits, right? What happened in any one of these, different activities? I can sort of click down, I can drill through, I can go through the years. For me and for a workers' comp attorney, this is a great way to visualize data. So I don't personally know what the use cases are in terms of bankruptcy if you look at things over time like this, but I want to show you that these tools, and by the way, ChatGPT can do this, Gemini can do this. They can actually build these really great interactive tools to see stuff. And if I only wanted to see certain information like emergency visits, I could click that. It would just show me then over the time, hey, when did emergency visits happen, right? Across the time horizon here. There was just two of them. So again, a great use case. If I go back here, you can see now this is done. So it did the analysis here. So it went through, Meridian Retail Group Chapter 11 analysis, right? Critical legal issues. So you can use these tools to build tools from very simple English language prompts that help you go do things. So again, part of this is I want to just show you examples of what you can do. So something else Claude did about 2 weeks ago, and I did a special session for the Beverly Hills Bar Association. They introduced these things called legal plugins, and they introduced a cool new set of tools that allow you to basically have a bunch of pre-written legal prompts that make using Claude even easier to use. The other thing that they did is they built this tool into Excel, which is honestly amazing. So I'm going to switch over for a second. I'm going to go to Excel. So they launched something. Actually, let me explain this. They launched something called Cowork. And you can only get this if you're actually using the Claude application. You can't get it on the web browser. And I'll pull open the application, but Cowork lets you work on files on your computer. So let's say, for example, you've got 100 files from a client and you're trying to execute something, or you want to, analyze all those files at once. Claude now through Cowork lets you do that. You can point at a directory and say, I want you to go read all these files. I want you to extract out all these different things and make this stuff happen. So, and by the way, I know I'm throwing a million things at you. And as Diane said, after this, go have a drink, absorb it, watch it again, because there's just so much I'm trying to just expose you to, because these tools are far more powerful than most people have realized. So I'm going to stop sharing this for 1 second here, and I'm going to share Excel because I just want to show you the Claude button in Excel here. I'm going to just open up Excel, and I have a bunch of transaction data here. And you'll see here, I've got a button over here that says Open Claude. I'm going to click Open Claude. And what you'll see here is I now have Claude sitting over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to switch models to Sonnet 4.6 because I don't need super advanced thinking on this. But let's say these are all these different, categories, and I wanted to, create a chart, or I wanted to do some analysis on it. I could literally just tell Claude in simple English, hey, create a chart of expenditure by category. I'll do something that simple, and I'm just going to go ahead and say go. So it's gonna read the data, it's gonna understand what's in here, and it's gonna go look through it all, and it's gonna say, let me aggregate that data and let me go create a summary chart for you. So, you know, hopefully this will create it in say 30 seconds or so. If it doesn't, I'll switch over to the Claude app so you can see Cowork for a second, because that's also a very useful thing to see. But I just wanted to show you this this application here. So let's see if this finishes up. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, let me switch over to the Claude app because by the time I finish that, this will be done. You can see it summarizing the data. It's responding. So I will, actually, you know what? I think this will actually get done pretty quick here. Let's see. We'll give it a second. Oh, so it created that summary table. So you can see here, it categorized all these expenditures and actually now just created, a high level chart for me by category, right? So you can see how quickly it did that. If you are familiar with pivot tables, it can do pivot tables. I've actually had it create income statements, multi-year income statements and balance sheets. But the beauty of this tool is the fact that it sits in Excel and you literally just tell it in plain English what you want. And it's amazing as to how powerful it is. Like I said, it can create charts. I could tell it, change the style, make it a vertical chart, change the whatever I want to do. I could say create pivot tables. I could say do analysis on this. Tell me what sticks out about any of the expenditures. And it would actually go analyze the data and do whatever I tell it to do. So again, a very, very powerful add-in tool that they have added to Excel. So this is the Claude app. And so if you're in the app, just like you're on the web page, so chat is the same chat you have on the web page over there. They have added now this thing called Cowork in the middle, right? And this is something that's brand new. They launched it on January 12th this year. And they added a couple things. One thing they added was the ability to go work in a folder. So I can actually go point at a folder here, say my downloads folder, and anything I tell it to do. I mean, I could say, go count the number of files, go count the number of files in this folder. Actually, I'll say go count the number of image files in this folder. And it's going to go off. And you'll see here, it's going to say, okay, I've got some progress over here. I've got some instructions that I'm going to go do and some context. So it's going to go off now and actually go count the number of image files in this folder. So it actually found, this is a download dump directory. There are 666 image files in this folder, including all these different types, right? And it would, normally you might go into a different tool and do that. But the fact that you can have it pointed at legal documents and have it say, okay, I want you to go open up every one of these, figure out what this is, do some analysis for me. It's a really powerful way to do it. But the other thing that they added that is really powerful are these legal plugins. And if I go slash here, and if I go plugins and I say legal, it added all these things. So if I wanted to create a legal brief or do a compliance check or review a contract or triage an NDA. So I'm going to do this one. I'm going to say, hey, I want you to triage this NDA. I'm actually I'm going to skip this and I'm going to upload a file because I put in a demo file. Let me just go grab it out of the sample directory here. I'm going to dump this sample NDA in here and I'm going to say go. And what it's going to do, it's actually going to go, it has a bunch of rules it's going to follow, it's things it's going to look for, like, hey, is this a one-sided NDA? Do we have all the requirements for my state in here? Whatever it is, it's going to figure out, okay, how good or how bad is this NDA? Like, can we improve it? Should we sign it? Should we not sign it? And the beauty of these plugins that Claude generated is you can go customize. In fact, they're designed for you to go customize to your business because everybody would look at different things for an NDA or a vendor compliance agreement or triaging a document. So I'm just using the generic text. So it's giving me a classification. Hey, red, do not sign, full legal review required, right? And it's telling me here all the things that are issues, right? There's no mutual obligations. The definition of scope is bad. The term is bad, right? Here are the things that are yellow. So then it's going to go through and give me this. So I didn't have to give it all these detailed instructions about how to go, triage this NDA. I could have customized it, but it's doing, as you can see here, a really beautiful job of summarizing this for me. So I don't have to go think about it. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I know we got about 45 minutes left. I got a bunch more demos I want to show you. So I'm now going to go back to, let me get the presentation back here so I can get back to where we were. All right, we covered co-work. So again, they added these plugins. I've uploaded a bunch of them. They've got finance ones, sales ones, marketing ones, legal ones, right? These are the legal ones they added: contract review, NDA triage, legal briefings, right? Compliance, template responses. So as I said, the beauty is you can go customize those for your organization. So that makes it really, really powerful. I'm not going to do a review contract. I just did the NDA triage one, which I thought was pretty useful. So it makes it really simple to do, but you can see it actually, in this case, created a Word doc for me, as you see on the right of the screen. It actually had the overall assessment of what to do. Hang on, I want to reshare because I just need to make sure that, yeah, sound was on. Okay, great. Here's another prompt. I won't go do this one because I want to get into Google Gemini for a minute, but I built a bunch of pre-done sort of bankruptcy prompts that hopefully you and your respective organizations will find useful, right? Maximizing Arizona exemptions requires knowledge, knowing current amounts and understanding what qualifies. Missing exemptions puts clients at risk. So I'll actually just show you the output of it. If I go back into here and I go back into projects, without trying to rerun it again on, through ChatGPT or the other ones. But you can see it went through all the things. And in this case, again, created here, a very nice Word doc for me as a starting point. And again, use these as collaborative tools, right? Use this and say, hey, this is a great start. I would download this. I would work on it. Don't assume this is the final output that you're going to want to give. But you can see here, based on the sample data that I put in here in the prompt, right, it went through here and actually created a very detailed, exemption application analysis, right? Section by section for all the things, is it protected? Is it non-exempt? Whatever it happens to be. So again, part of what I wanted to do that Diane asked me for is to give you guys prompts and examples that would hopefully be, relevant and useful in your day-to-day work. So hopefully you find these helpful as we go through this. So let me go back here. And now I want to switch to Gemini. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here because a lot of this stuff is pretty common to what you've seen already. But there are a few things that Gemini does that is truly unique that none of the other tools do. Well, I actually think I'm sharing my desktop versus sharing a window. Sorry about that. There we go. Hopefully that was all good. So I want to talk about Gemini. So the latest models here, look, this is natively multimodal from inception. And what does that mean? So from the beginning, when they started building Gemini, they actually started building it to understand video and audio as well as text. And when I say it understands video, as you'll see in an example, it actually doesn't just get the video and get the text out of the video. It actually truly understands what's happening in those scenes, as you'll see in an example, right? They were the first one that had that 1 million token context window, sort of that 3,000 pages of text, right? If you are in the Google ecosystem, right? If you are, working in Gemini or Gmail and Calendar, right? It actually connects to all those in great ways. They've got live voice, live interaction. Their interface, again, is very similar. If I go into here and I say do a new chat, right, you'll see here you've got your three models. You've got fast, you've got thinking, you've got pro. You've got different tools to create images, to do deep research. You can create videos. They recently added the ability to simply add music on here, right, which again was very, very useful. They've got guided learning, and I have something called Deep Think. I subscribe to their, it's called their Ultra plan, their $250 a month one. Deep Think is their version of ChatGPT Pro. It does absolutely unbelievable detailed analysis, right? It's super, super incredible on that front. So really, really good stuff. Their two models, the ones that you're primarily going to use. Oh, hang on. Someone added a question. Do any of the AI engines, Claude, Gemini, purposefully exclude data based upon a statute or other law? What is excluded? No, they don't. Um, that's so I mean, just by default, they don't exclude things. You could ask it to try and exclude things, and I mean, I've never tried that explicitly, but by default, it doesn't. It works on all of its training data, and it will go search the web to go find the latest. There are ways, by the way, to minimize, like when you're working in deep research, you can say, I only want you to go to, say, official government sources or things like that. That's okay. But in general, when you're using the sort of the chatbot version of it, it goes for everything. So they have two different models. They've got their 3.1 Pro model. It's their most intelligent. This just came out last week, last Thursday. It is unbelievably smart. It is leading the reasoning models right now. They also have a 3.0 Pro Flash model, or 3.0 Flash model, which is also incredibly smart. It is incredibly fast. It's a super well balanced model. They have something called Gemini Gems, which are somewhat similar to a project, but not quite the same. It's more like a custom GPT where you can put in some custom instructions and you can just sort of have it operate those instructions and reference those files again and again. It won't reference all the other chats you had in there. It really is just a place where if you want to have a set of instructions that you don't have to type again and again, you can just sort of go use those instructions. I already talked about Canvas. It has the same thing. We looked at the demo earlier where you can actually go through and interactively chat. One of the things that Gemini is very good at is image generation. So I'll use this as sort of a fun one for a second. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a St. Bernard. This is Magnus. Magnus and I were up on the Oregon coast a couple months ago, and I took this raw source photo and I uploaded it into Gemini, and I said, hey, I said, make Magnus a world-class chef at a Parisian restaurant, right? I said, hey, put us in front of the Paris Opera House, put me in a tux, or put us driving around Crater Lake, right? From a simple prompt, it can turn one image into another. You can make holiday items out of it, right? I could say, hey, make this really cool interactive map of California, right? Visually stunning. But the power of these is infographics. And I was showing infographics at the beginning. You can create now, and only Gemini does this, and the tool is called Nano Banana Pro, where you can say, go create, an infographic about the history of, in this case, the history of Humana, someone that I did a client presentation with. It was amazing. And as long as you're using the pro version, you're not going to get typos. You're going to get great examples, and you can change the style to anything you want also, right? You're not limited to a certain style. You can make it look like this. You can change things. You can even upload a document. I was presenting to the actuaries, and I said, take this document about the impact of AI on the actuary industry and create an infographic about it, right? So if you've got something around the bankruptcy code or something you're working on, you can actually tell it, hey, go make this happen, go do this. So deep research we talked about. I do want to talk about Notebook LM for a second. This again is a really powerful tool. It is really, really useful. It's something that is very unique to Google. So Google launched this thing called Notebook LM a while ago. And I've got all these different examples in here. I'm going to go into this funny one called canine depositions. And so you can have, by the way, so if you look at these workspaces, these notebooks, every one of these notebooks can have 500 different documents in it, right? And so it can actually have up to, I think, about 20 million words of content, an extraordinary amount of video links, text links, document links. You can see I think I put in here a couple of hundred depositions. I made these really funny depositions about dogs. If I go open one of these, right? My name is Abby. I'm a dachshund, right? I've lived with the Wilson family for these years. I was trying to show people, how you can ask questions about these things and create things. And so you can create tables. One of the things that's great is over here on the right, you can see there's this thing called an audio overview. And so what made Notebook LM, famous in the beginning, was the ability to do these audio overviews. So they would create these podcasts. So you can upload a bunch of content and have it create a podcast. Now, this may not load fast enough.
Dive.
So if you can hear
Our
this,
mission today is a bit of an unusual one.
It really is.
We're
hopefully the audio
sifting
is coming
through
through.
what are being called depositions of domestic dogs. Basically, sources summarizing their daily life, their activities, and, what makes them happy.
And what stands out immediately is that a dog's happiness isn't just about food and a roof over their head. It's about shared purpose.
Right.
The data shows this huge spectrum from dogs living these peak lives of engagement.
So I'm going to pause. By the way, I apologize. I think my camera went out. I think it got a little overheated. So I'll go blank for a few minutes on this. But you get a sense of what this is. But you can also create, mind maps, video overviews, reports, flashcards. What I really like is also this ability to create beautiful infographics, right? So from a single prompt, I just said, create an infographic about the life of dogs from this, right? You can see what this created. This is astonishing for me, as a creator to be able to go do something like this is incredible, would be incredibly difficult. The same thing is you can actually create presentations out of your content. So if I click on this here, this actually created a full-on, equivalent of like a PowerPoint presentation from the source content I put in there, again, from a single prompt. So this tool, and this is why when I was answering the question earlier about, learning stuff, this is amazing. And the thing that is unique about this particular tool is it only works on the content that you have uploaded into, into this tool, right? It does not actually go search the web. If you ask a question about this, it only goes to these particular source documents. So that part is very, very different compared to, what this can do otherwise. So let me go back over here for a minute. There is another question. Follow up. The AI engines are thus limited to data publicly available on the internet. Correct. In other words, the engine cannot get data from the FBI servers or private servers. Correct. Unless it was, unless they had exposed that out there. Yeah, it's not going to be available. If things are behind a firewall, it wasn't trained on there either. But literally, the hundreds of trillions of documents that are out there, on the internet, it has all been trained on so far.
Steve,
I showed you.
it's Diane,
Yeah.
just to interrupt. There was a question prior to that. Can AI tools take an existing website and write the code for a new one?
Absolutely. That is very easy to do with these tools. You could actually, and they're all great at it. Google's great at it. ChatGPT's great at it. Claude's great at it. In fact, if I pull up, for example, my website, my Intelligence by Intent website, this entire site was created by Claude. I use Claude code. I do updates to it, right? It automatically pulls in research off my, my latest research off my Substack. This was, and I was pointing at old ones. I could literally point at it and say, you could actually point at an existing site and say, hey, go create my site that looks like that. And it would actually help you go do that. So great question. Very, very easy to go do. This is another powerful tool that Google has called AI Studio. And one of the things that Google has, as I said, they are natively multimodal, and they actually have an ability to process video. So I'm not going to demo so much what AI Studio can do. This is an example here of AI Studio. I uploaded this 1 hour and 1 minute long video deposition. And I basically told it, I said, hey, I'm a trial lawyer analyzing a 60-minute video deposition of a plaintiff. I've uploaded this video that shows the plaintiff alleging harassment by a supervisor, but hesitating when asked for specific dates. Provided detailed analysis, including a summary of the plaintiff's claims, observations of demeanor and credibility, all these different things, right? So it went through. And it understood everything in that video. I could have said, hey, when were they hedging? When were they being angry, right? And it created an entire trial brief report on that video deposition analysis, right? Summary of the plaintiff's claims, observations of demeanor and credibility, right? Key statements and inconsistencies, right? Timestamps of consistent, significant moments. So the only tool that can do this is Google's Gemini, because it, like I said, it natively understands video, and it has that super, super large context window. You can also get full-on transcripts from it. You could also say, take that transcript, convert it to a different language. Again, powerful use cases, powerful tools, something that is really unique to the Google suite. There's another tool, I'm not going to go into it, called Gemini CLI. Claude has one called Claude Code, but it's basically a text-based interface that lets you, when you were asking that question literally about the website, this is a tool you would use. You would use a tool like Claude Code or Google Gemini to go do that and make that happen. I'm not going to go into this. All right, another example, meeting preparation guide, right? Clients are anxious about the 341 meeting. Preparing them for likely questions based on their specific circumstances helps give them accurate, concise answers, right? So the prompt, create a 341 meeting preparation guide for the client. Here's the case type. Here's the prior bankruptcy info, right? Red flags in the case. Here's a bunch of key facts. Create standard questions, case specific questions, right? What documents to bring, do's and don'ts, common mistakes. So again, I've pre-done this because these can take a while to go run. So if I just go pull this one up, again, I want to show you what the output of this looks like. It actually created, again, a very nicely formatted Word document for me here. Let me load this up. I'll see if my camera is now sort of unheated since it's been going on for a while. I'll pull on this going on. Let me just see if I get my camera back. There we go. I will share my video again. Hopefully, yep, great, I'm back. So look, you can see here, prepared this 341 meeting prep guide, right? All the things that are in here, your case at a glance, what is a 341 meeting, the good news, your case has no red flags. So it goes through standard questions you're going to be asked, right? Oath in the petition review, assets and debts, right? So it helps you, again, prepare this stuff, right? So again, I created, pretty generic prompts. You guys will obviously be able to create much, much more detailed prompts than I can. But what I try to give you through the course of this presentation today is some really good examples about how you can use this and things to do, right? So again, a great starting point for what you would see there. So agenda, I want to talk very briefly about privacy and data protection. I've got one slide to make it simple, and I want to go through a couple more simple examples. So this is super important. I know a lot of solo practitioners, you want to use the consumer, the free or the individual paid ones, right? By default, these train on your data. You can turn it off, right? And if you are going to use a consumer grade one, first of all, I don't recommend it. I really encourage you to use the Teams or the enterprise ones because you get data protection, you get privacy. You do not get that on the consumer ones, even if you're paying for it, right? There's been some rulings recently in the last couple of weeks in New York, especially if your clients are using that stuff. The consumer grade ones, because of the terms of services, don't provide privilege because you can't protect the data from third-party review. So if you are going to use one, again, don't recommend it. Please, turn off training. You can do that on the free or the paid ones. But again, I don't recommend it. What I do recommend is both ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, or all, I should say all of them, have Teams versions and they have enterprise versions, right? Use those. Your data is not used for training, right? You get administrative controls. Your data is encrypted at rest and in transit. There is no human review allowed, which is obviously important when you're thinking about privilege. So super, super important. On Google, the minimum person is one. You can subscribe for, I think, $20 a month to get a business one from them. For Anthropic, for Claude, the minimum is 5, and they're $30 a month, so it's $150 a month. And for ChatGPT, the minimum was 2, and I think it's $25 a month, so it's like $50 a month, right? So this is not an expensive amount of things. Please, please, please get at least the team/business versions of these, because then you can actually put in legal data. You don't have to worry as much about PII. They will not train on your data. That's the default, and third-party people can't access it. And you get most of these privacy things also, SOC 2 compliance and things like that. You can get BAAs in some of the Teams one as well, particularly with Google. So if that stuff is important to you, you can get that there. But my recommendation is please don't use the consumer free ones, and tell your clients if they're doing it also not to use those particular tools. Someone asked, when dealing with images, does AI discriminate or warn potential copyright violations? So if you try and create a copyrighted image in ChatGPT or in Gemini, it will tell you it can't do that. So they've been pretty well trained on it. Some of the other tools that are out there, if you use some of the Chinese image-based tools, they will create anything you want, any copyrighted image they're good at. They're also very good at, they won't work on, say, people under 18 images, like they don't want to work on kids. So they've really tried to do a good job about protecting against copyright. ChatGPT has actually done a license deal with Disney, so you can do some of the Disney characters. But, if I told it, hey, go create, Mickey Mouse in these scenes, it would tell me, no, I can't do that. If I asked Gemini to do that, it would say, hey, that violates copyright. All right. There are 27 minutes left. I'm going to hit a few more use cases. I definitely want to leave some time for Q&A at the end, but I think a lot of these use cases are really interesting because people don't realize that they can, that these tools can do these things. So One of these things that these tools are great at, two of these things really, is language translation and reading from an image. So a lot of people don't realize that even if you've got kind of a bad image, these tools are so good now at reading what's on an image and translating things that it's astounding. So as an example, so I'll make this a little bit bigger here so you can see it. But I might have this, this doctor's note that's got a combination of English and Tagalog, right? I mean, if I was looking at this, I'd be like, I would have a hard time reading what this said and trying to translate, hey, was this useful, right? From something that I was working on. I can actually grab this image. I'm going to go over to Gemini here. Well, let me grab this prompt. I'm going to say, hey, attaches a doctor's note that is relevant to a divorce case I'm working on. It's from a doctor in the Philippines. It has a combination of English and, Tagalog. Give me a detailed translation and description from this image. And again, ChatGPT, I'm going to use the thinking one, is very, very good at image generation. I'm going to go grab this image, drop it in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and say go. And it should actually process this pretty quickly here. So it's a handwritten consultation note from, Dr. Nino. I mean, like you could already see, it's already grabbing things that I would have been hard pressed to grab. If I had used the pro model, I would have gotten something more akin to this output, but I was using the thinking one for speed. But I just want to show you how fast it can get, information out of these models to go grab things, right? And it's astonishing at doing translation. ChatGPT also, this actually output was from a ChatGPT page. And you can see it took 1 minute and 26 seconds. But again, I don't want to kind of wait this long in purposes of these demos, but it's really, really good at going to get this kind of information. Another really good example is getting information, getting metrics from financial statements. So I'll use an example. Again, I've got an Apple 10K from 2024, and I want to have it go extract a bunch of information out there, right? Go get out, revenue growth rate, net income, EBITDA, locate all the relevant sections. I'm going to go grab this prompt again. I'm going to go to ChatGPT here. I'm going to make sure that I'm on auto for speed. Grab this here. Let me go grab Apple's 10K. Let this load up here. And the 10K is a long document. I mean, that 10K is, it's probably 100 pages. Oh, come on, load up here. Come on, ChatGPT, be fast for change. Try and be fast. Let me remove it and try again. See if I do it a second time, it'll get faster this time. No, you're going to be slow. All right, let's see if Gemini will just load this one faster for purposes of, I'll even try the pro model here for this. Let me paste this in, paste and match style. Let's go grab this document. Yep, it loaded it. Let's see if ChatGPT's got it now too. So we'll let them both go and you can kind of see the results of it. But it'll go through, it'll read the document, it will start extracting that financial data and make that stuff happen. While that's going on both of these, because it'll take it a second for both of these, I'm going to just look at what the next demo page is. This is a great one. I'll describe it, then I'll go run this. So the other thing that these tools are really, really good at is you can put a chart like this in place. So this is a chart of, the streaming drives global music industry to new highs, right? So it's a trend of, hey, what happened in, physical music, what happened in downloads from digital music, right? Others, and then how has streaming happened? These tools are so good at actually reading charts and understanding charts and interpreting insights that, I mean, you can see the output on the right-hand side, that, hey, this chart illustrates significant transformation in the global recorded music industry's revenue sources. Here are some things that happened, right? There was a decline of physical formats. The transition began prominently after Apple introduced iTunes Store, the rise and fall of digital downloads, right? Rapid growth, overall industry growth, right? It actually read that and interpreted that from the chart. But let me go back here. So you can see here, look, this actually went through, created the key financial metrics from Apple, right? Revenue growth rate, net income, EBITDA, which I'd asked it to calculate because it wasn't in there, right? So it can actually go through and run calculations. And many of you might know that in the early days of these large language models, calculations were terrible. It made math mistakes all the time. It now calls on tools. It runs Python programs. It'll actually generate code to actually go grab, that information, right? So it went through, calculated it. It's going through, calculated EBITDA on these things, right? I can export this to Sheets. So again, you see these tools are really good at going through and grabbing financial information and providing summaries. I'll go actually grab this one. I'll go do another one here in Gemini. Let me paste the prompt in. Oh, I didn't grab the prompt. Sorry. I want to grab this just to show you but this stuff is pretty good at this. I'm going to go grab the prompt or grab that image. I will use thinking for speed, and I'll do the same thing again in ChatGPT. Drop that in. Let me drop in not the 10K, the image here. And we'll say go. And again, these are, pretty quick, right? To go through and do the analysis. I mean, that's a very, very quick analysis for what it's trying to do. And ChatGPT is basically, already generating the same kind of thing. So the point is, most people don't realize just how good these things are at charting and generation. Here's another great example. So I do a lot of work with valuation clients and a lot of law firms where I need to get tax data out of a tax form, right? So what I wanted to do is it's actually very good at going through and extracting tax information out of this stuff. And so I'm going to take this prompt. I'm basically going to say, look, I need you to go extract all this critical tax data. I'm going to just paste it here. I'm going to go grab this tax form. Now let's let this load up here. This is a mock tax form, and I'm going to go do the same thing in Gemini here. I'll paste in the prompts. I will grab in the tax PDF. I'll tell this one Pro. I'll even run this one here in Claude, and I'm going to do this one in Sonnet because Sonnet is definitely the faster model. And I will paste this in. I'm going to grab this because I just want you to see what the different outputs look like again in these different models as we go through here. So that one's still thinking, that one's still thinking, that one's still thinking. All right, give it a minute. And this one's going to actually build an Excel file, so that'll actually be nice. So let's just talk about the next one for a second. Extracting key information from discovery docs. And this is, if you remember the Excel spreadsheet I showed you earlier, where I had a bunch of credit card transactions, this is the same file. I could have literally uploaded that spreadsheet into ChatGPT or into Claude or into Gemini and basically said, I want you to go, identify the trends in the expenditure by month, right? The total amounts, total number of transactions. I want you to create me a chart for this. You can see this was actually one from Claude I did a while ago. I won't do this again because I already showed you the Excel file and how actually Claude is sitting in Excel now, and you can go grab it. Let's see if one of these is done. Oh, great. So you can see here, Claude actually is doing a great job. It actually created here, the CSV file for me, exactly like I asked it to go grab all the data, all the rows, everything that's in here, right? So again, very quickly grabbed all that stuff. Same thing here. Gemini went through and grabbed all this data. It's pulling all the stuff, and I could actually then save it as a CSV file. Video testimony we did already, which was great. Creating an audio transcript. I didn't show this, but if I was back in here and let's say I had this video file and I actually wanted to just I did. I take it back. I showed you this. I grabbed the audio transcript from this file. So you can actually say, hey, let's say someone sent you a video and you don't have the transcript. You could take that video, you could upload it into Gemini, either the regular one or into AI Studio, and say, I want you to give me a full-on word-for-word transcript with timestamps from this. You can do the same thing if you had an audio file as well. I already did the Chapter 11, analyzer with file tools. I showed you that one already. We went in there. This is another great example. I'm going to show you a slightly different tool here. So one of the things that made this possible with CoWork is super fast and, can let you operate on files on your computer. So I don't know how often this is for you. It might be quite common, but in a lot of the law firms I work with, they'll get in 100 financial documents from a client. They're not properly named. They don't really know what they are. They might be credit card statements. They might be bank statements. They might be tax return statements, right? And one of the things that you might have a paralegal doing is you might have them going through document by document saying, okay, what is this? I need to go recategorize this. I want to make this happen, right? So I'm going to show you a tool called Claude Code, which is a text-based interface. And I could use Claude CoWork, but CoWork's a little bit slower. And I've got 100 financial documents in a directory. And I wanted to basically rename those in the following format. I wanted to basically open up every file that's in there, and I wanted to figure out what it is. And I want to rename it in the format of, hey, a 5-character case code, date in year, month, day format, the document type, the vendor, so an example, Sterling 2026-113, credit card statement, Southwest Visa, right? So I know exactly what it is. I want it to create a subdirectory called categorize. I want it to analyze every file, identify the document type, date and vendor, and then copy it into the new name into categorize. So I want it to leave the original ones alone. So when I talk to law firms, they would say, hey, this would take one of our folks, a long time, several hours to go do. I'm going to go point at a directory here for a second. So I'm going to go open this up, and I'm going to open up a terminal window. So this will look, for a lot of you, this may look a little different and might be a little bit scary if you've never used the terminals before. And so let me share my screen a little bit differently here. Let me go share my terminal window here. And hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to say Claude, dangerously skip permissions. The reason I'm doing this is I actually, normally you would never say that. I actually want to do that because I don't want to have to keep answering, yes, do this, yes, do this, yes, do this. Normally it would, before it operates in any file, it would actually, ask me permission before I'd actually went in every file and did that. But let me go grab here. I'm going to paste in this prompt, just saying, hey, there's over 100, financial documents in here. Let me go grab this. I'm going to say go. It's now going to go through and it's going to open up every one of these files. And, in there's 100 of these, text documents in there. It's going to analyze what it is in Claude. You can see there's 101 files. Let me read the samples of each one to understand the format. And it's going to figure out, is this a tax return? Is this a bank statement? Is it to do it? And it's now writing the code to analyze all these files to go back and translate it into a new directory. It'll copy it in there with this new name. And this will maybe take, the entirety of 1 minute to run across 100 files. And normally this would take, as I said, a paralegal or an associate, a number of hours to go through, figure out what it was, get it named the right way, get a copy the right way. I could have also had it create an index file at the end. So if I wanted to say, hey, go create a single index, so I have a new Word document about what this file is, it would actually show me what it is and tell me what it's doing. So it's going through there. It's verifying the results, it's writing it. And when this is all done, it will have actually processed every one of those files, create a new directory. And you can see here, it's done, right? It said there were 47 bank statements, US Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. This is the new format it put it in. It had, 48 credit card statements, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, 5 tax documents, and one other. Oh yeah, I'd created a text document in here. And if I literally go in now into this financial directory, I'll show you something. I'll share this other window for 1 second here. If I go into financial statements, let me just make sure that everything is good on here. Yep, it is. You'll see here that in the raw directory, it had all these raw files. It created in here a new categorized directory for me, and it has now renamed all these files in exactly the format that I asked it to, right? Sterling 2025, 315, bank statement, Wells Fargo, right? So again, a super powerful and useful use case that, would have been very difficult before the advent of all these different tools and things like that. So I'm not going to do this one. You can use some of these tools. Went too far to redact PDFs, properly. We've got that stuff. You can do things to, preference and do fraudulent transfer analysis. So again, I'm going to give you all these prompts here, chapter 13, plan draft and payment calculator. Again, these are examples you get to see because you're going to get all these slides. I'm not going to go through them. I want to hit prompting for 2 minutes to show you some things in prompting. And then I've just got a couple of things at the end. So look, the first thing, and hopefully you figure this out from the conversation, is prompting is a journey. It's a conversation with these tools, right? And so the best things I can tell you are at the bottom of the screen here, right? Be really specific and clear. Like you've seen my prompts, like they're pretty lengthy. They're good at what they're doing. Sorry, I was reading the question. I'll come back to this question in a second. Be specific and clear. Give it a lot of direction, right? You can use context and examples. If you have sample output that you want it to do, you can actually say, hey, here's a sample document. I want you to do an analysis like this and make the output look like this, right? Tell it to break down complex tasks, right? Give it step 1, step 2, step 3. If there's a particular format you want, you want bullet format, you want text format, you want narrative style, tell it that too. You can tell it constraints, right? You can say, hey, only work on, Arizona bankruptcy code from the 9th district or the 9th circuit, right? Whatever happens to be, you can then, after you get the first one, iterate and refine, right? Keep going and use the features of the systems. Use image generation, use tables, use Excel spreadsheets, things like that. So the format that I have generally used that you've seen in these examples, I call it RTDF, kind of role, task, details format. So role and context, right? To define the role of kind of what you want this large language model LLM to be, right? Hey, I'm a senior partner at a bankruptcy firm. I'm a senior partner at a litigation firm. I'm a senior partner, or I'm a second year associate, or I'm a judge in this district, right? Tell it what you want it to think of itself as, and it will try and analyze from that point of view. Give it the task, right? Be very specific about what you want the large language model to do. Give it all the details. Give it as many details as you can. And hopefully you saw in those prompts what I want those details to look like. And then the format of the output, right? I want you to answer these specific questions. I want you to use bullet points. I want you to write in first person or third person, or I want a table or an Excel file. So again, you can be very, very specific about what you want it to do there. So let me just answer the question. How does the AI identify who was speaking when creating a transcript? So if the name has come up in it, if somebody's referred to somebody as a name, it'll be able to pull it out of there. If it doesn't have the name, like if no one is actually named by names in there, it will call it, speaker one, speaker two, speaker three. But like in that video deposition, everyone had either introduced themselves, so it recognized the voice and it knew what the name was, and is smart enough then to refer to that voice and know who it is going forward. But if there's literally no reference to it, then it can't, obviously, because it doesn't, know who person. It'll tell you, speaker A or person A, as it goes through with it there. I have some simple examples in here of what I call, good prompts versus bad prompts, and these are very, very simple, right? Just to get you started if you haven't been using these tools, right? A bad prompt is tell me about employment law cases, right? That would be a terrible prompt. A better prompt would be, find key federal court decisions from the past 5 years, addressing whether remote work is a reasonable combination under the ADA, focus on cases from the Ninth Circuit, right? So again, in all these prompt guides here, you've seen much more detailed ones, things like that, that you can go through. Again, I got a couple of pages in here of kind of good ones and bad ones. A concept called meta prompting, where let's say you're working on a prompt and you don't exactly have what you want. You can have these tools help you, right? You could literally tell it, hey, help me create a prompt that gets me the best possible output for the following. I work for the law firm Intelligence by Intent LLC. I want to ensure we're accurately fact-checking our output with a large language model before sending it to the client. Help me create a detailed prompt to do this and ask me any clarifying questions you need. So these tools will help you make amazing prompts. If you put that in, you'll have to have an entire interactive prompt session that is absolutely great. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I want to leave time for like in-person Q&A if we have it. Look, the one thing I want to tell you, these tools are the dumbest that they will ever be for the rest of your life, and they are already unbelievably smart. Hopefully you've seen examples of just how smart these tools can be, right? They are absolutely incredible. I want to say, again, legal responsibility, AI versus you. You are responsible, right? I had a text version of the slide earlier on. I kind of like this, my 50s robotics version. The thing in the middle is the most important. Human review after final AI modification, not before, right? The AI doesn't care about your instructions. They're not going to stand in front of the judge. They don't have a bar number. You do. Use these tools. They're unbelievably powerful. They are great, but they can make mistakes, right? They're not perfect, just like a human can make mistakes. I write a Substack on a regular basis. It's 100% free. I write a lot of legal things, a lot of AI things. Mostly it's about how to use these tools better. It's literally my name. The Substack is just at smithsteven with a ph.com. I mean, here's a screenshot of it. I mean, I literally write 2 to 3 times a week, right? I write about law things, business cases, all sorts of stuff. But again, it's a completely free resource. And if you're looking for more help, this is sort of my commercial for me. There's 3 ways I can help, right? I do extended workshops that are much more in depth than this for firms, right? I sit with a firm in leadership to really walk you through how to use AI, how to understand what you can do, what tools you would want to use, things like that. I do firm-wide training if people are interested in that. And for a select amount of clients, because I can only do so many at a time, I work with them to do AI-enabled case support. I'm working with several clients where we have multiple tens of thousands of documents, and using these enterprise AI tools to help them analyze that, do stuff, right? Understand, how to approach, litigation concerns, how to approach depositions, how to create detailed timelines, because, the average tools, they're going to handle 20 documents. They're not going to handle 10,000. So I work with them to figure that stuff out. Again, I have my newsletter, and feel free to reach out to me for this stuff. I'm happy to help. Again, my contact information is on all these things, and I'll put the disclaimer page at the end for Diane around the ACBC disclaimer around the content here. So that's it. I know this has been a fire hose of almost 2 hours. I'm going to pause just to like let people come back on video and see what other questions you have, or if Diane has questions. I'm going to hit stop here so I can sort of see whoever's on the chat that has things they want to ask about, if anyone. And hopefully, Diane, that fire hose was exactly what you were looking for.
Well, as I said, go watch the recording at least one or two more times and make notes. Now, throughout all of this, Steve, you were mentioning you'll be happy to share whether it was prompts or instructions or whatever. Can you send me a bundle of whatever it was you wanted
Sure.
to
Yeah.
share? And then I can, what you can do is to email admin@acbcforum.org and ask for, let's call it the Steve's bundle. And then that will simplify him having to respond back to 30 people asking for stuff. I'm not going, well, yes, with Steve's permission, I will post that material also where it's publicly available, because we do have a mixed bag here. We've got all attorneys, obviously. There may be a paralegal or two tucked in here, I don't know. We have some members from ACBC, and then we also have a group of like-kind attorneys that we just offer these free CLE programs to. So, questions. Jim Kahn is my mentor. He has been my mentor for 40 years now. He says, yes, it was the fire hose, but very helpful. Thank you. Frank says, in your Apple example, in reviewing the 10K, how sure are you that the analysis you were given was correct?
Yeah.
And then
that's a great question. And so when I was doing these examples, Frank, I was using like the super quick thinking models, right? I would never do that in the real world. I would use the most detailed extended thinking one, because what it will do then, it will check its work, right? It'll be like, okay, let me go through. I will double check all the math. For purposes of speed, I didn't do that. And I mean, I even caught errors because I know what the numbers are, right? Because I was using like the super fast ones. That's why I tell people up front in the beginning, use extended thinking, right? Use the stuff. And what I would personally do is I would actually use two models to have it cross-check each other, right? I would run the analysis in one. I would then take that analysis and I would put it in another one and say, hey, this is the questions I've asked. I want you to go through and cross-check every number in here. And then when you're using the power of two models to cross-check the thinking, that's honestly, my best way of fact-checking things, right? I do that all the time. I rarely rely on just one output for things that are especially numerically important. I want to go double check and I'll sanitize it. I was a CFO for a long time, so I'll sort of spot check numbers and look at things too. But it's super important. And that's why I say human review at the end is important. But you can actually do that stuff really well. Can you use AI tools to run a systems penetration test? These particular tools are not designed to do that. These tools are aimed, there's a lot of restrictions on doing that from these tools. A struggle we have in my office is creating workflows that require us to use and pay for multiple platforms, or the big three. Is there a clear leader or anticipated future leader? You know, the problem, look, it's a great question, John. The challenge is they tend to leapfrog each other every couple, every month or two, like someone's sort of the new leader, at least in reasoning or something else, right? I mean, here's the way that I look at them today is in terms of pure analytical reasoning. Google with their Gemini model is far and away ahead of everybody else as of this moment, as of February 25th, right? Like I said, this could change tomorrow, but their reasoning is broadly considered, far and away the absolute best. When it comes to actual like writing and communication right now, and the ability to use like Microsoft Office documents, if you're in that world, Claude is really, really good. It's exceptional. ChatGPT is really kind of the Swiss Army knife, right? It is outstanding at image generation. It is very, very good at doing numerical analysis. When I want to crunch spreadsheets and actually have it, cross-pollinate things and do programming, it's a really great tool. And its deep research is outstanding. And it's, like I said, it has a pro model. So if you're on, I'm on the Consumer Pro subscription and I have an enterprise one. That pro one, when I want the most advanced reasoning, I think it's the best one out there, like for practical use, right? So they all have different strengths. So you have to kind of look at your particular workflow and figure out which one's best. Like I said, 6 months ago, I was 80% ChatGPT. Today I'm 60% Claude, 30% Gemini, and 10% ChatGPT. But that's my personal workflow, right? You have to look at what yours is, and it might be a little bit different. But that's kind of the best advice I can give you at this moment. And think about what you're trying to do. I mean, like I said, if you already live in, say, a Google world, like if you use Google Workplace in your office environment, then it's going to make sense probably to stick with Gemini because it really integrates into that world. So I know we have 1 minute left. Any last minute questions? So, if not, look, I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the opportunity to come and present to everybody. If you're looking for help, please reach out. Please feel free to subscribe, like I said, to the Substack. It's completely free, and it will always be free. I'm not, I try to just make it as a service for people to use, to learn. I try to make it sort of end user friendly versus technical. So again, Diane, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you again in the future. So thank you very much.
If you were to take a semi-intelligent person and want to give them some kind of a summary training video, what would be the place we would go to find something like that?
Well, like this one that we did here is obviously cuts across all the tools, right?
Okay.
Claude has a bunch of their own training. Google Gemini has a bunch of their own training. There are a lot of people on YouTube that are out there that do, like generalized training and stuff like that too. Obviously I do workshops for firms and I do custom training. So there's a lot of public resources out there. It just depends on which tool you're using. I mean, like I said, if you pick Claude or if you pick Gemini, I'd probably go look at their training a little bit. And again, it'll be very high level. It won't be like this. Like I went into, legal use cases, right? You're not going to find many people that are doing that, right? That's a pretty small niche.
Right, exactly. And everybody, I have posted the CLE certificate a couple of times. I know occasionally someone has a problem downloading it. No big deal. Just email me at admin@acbcforum.org. Frankie goes on, a concern he has is judges will start applying AI timeframes to applications of attorney's fees. More of a perspective statement, a rhetorical statement, rather than there's no question. Yesterday I was watching a NCBGA CLE talking with 3 judges talking about AI in their courtroom and some of the challenges that they have and how their courtroom is using it, et cetera. If I was to look at a spectrum, one of the judges says you should not be drafting using these tools. You should be starting on your own and know what you're talking about. Another one, and I think more along the lines of what's common sense, using any of these tools as a basic core to draft these documents, whatever the research is you're looking for is good, but without exception, you're going to have to disclose if someone was to ask you, not only to the judge, but perhaps to your client too. So you've got to keep that in line. And for Pete's sake, don't do what one non-bankruptcy attorney, the idiot, came into bankruptcy and played around in here like she pretended knowing what she was talking about. The judge slammed her again and again and again, and then finally came back and asked her the question, did you use AI to do this? And she lied and said no. So you can imagine the sanctions that are coming out of that.
Yeah.
Anybody else before we let Steve go? Well, Steve, thank you. Thank you. Literally, this has been fabulous. And if you think of something you'd like to come back and talk to us about, I should have forewarned everybody, you do speak like a teenager as far as how fast you talk.
Yeah, I know.
So. All right. Well, it looks like your camera's mad at you again.
Yeah, it is again. Yeah.
All right. We'll let everybody go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.